Welcome to BWI Live. I'm Thomas Frank Carr. This is the Penn State football post-game show. A little bit closer than we expected, or at least most people expected. Penn State wins by 14, not by 18, not by 21. They don't put up 38 points. Drew Allar finishes with 135 yards passing, but the Nittany Lions nearly get both of their running backs over 100 yards in this game. 18 carries for Katron Allen, 102 yards. 16 carries for Nick Singleton for 94. The ground game is pretty healthy, and that's how Penn State wins this game. The short analysis, and if you want to just, I don't want to say just, pop off after this, but they hit bleep it in the third quarter and just decided that's how the game was going to go. 16 runs in the third quarter. Penn State had an overwhelming advantage in the trenches up front over the Illinois defense, and they just rode that to victory. They didn't need Drew Allar to be special tonight. Again, 71% completion percentage. He was efficient on the night after they decided to change some things up. We'll get into what we expected versus what actually happened, which were pretty different in this game, to be honest with you, from that Illinois defense. But as always, here on the postgame show, you are the co-host. So if you got some questions, you got some comments, put them in the chat. It's been spicy to start already. And we'll see what you got up for us. David Greeter, first up, he says Abdul needs to move back to linebacker, give him more opportunities to read the play and then attack it, line him up at DN on passing downs, but keep him at linebacker otherwise. D needs to tackle, should have been 35-7. David, we disagree. We disagree about Abdul Carter playing D end. I think the main thing is that he can't go off sides. It's funny. It's not just this game. I was watching the Illinois game earlier today. The Indiana game earlier today. All the I teams are getting in my head and getting all mixed up. Indiana had a similar problem where they kept lining up off sides, and Penn State has had a real problem of staying on sides in games this year from the defensive line perspective, because it's not just Abdul Carter. Denai Dennis Sutton had one. Amin Vanover had one, I believe, that led to one of the big plays for Luke Altmaier and the Illinois offense in the first half. So I think he's playing really well at D end. They used him as a spy in those third down situations at the end of the game. That, I think, has been very good. I do not disagree with your end here, David. The defense needs to tackle better. And there's some gamesmanship in that situation. I think some players need to play better overall. It is not a systemic issue for this team. I think there are specific players that are not necessarily tackling very well. But there does seem to be something to finishing the play. Zane Durant should have had another sack and another tackle for a loss, maybe a third extra tackle for a loss in this game, because he was in the backfield all evening. So the story of the game here really is Penn State controlled the line of scrimmage on both sides of the football. And I kind of agree with what Mike says. He says this should have been 45-7. I don't think it should have been 45-7. I do think it could have been a wider margin. I mean, Penn State, if they hit 2 field goals that were well within the striking distance, you add 6 points, 27-20. They cover if they hit both of those scoring opportunities on those drives that ended in no points. And I think one of them was an 11-play drive. Whew. But yeah, Penn State out Illinois in this game. And I think that's something that James Franklin does from time to time. Is they hit the second half of a game and they go, what's going on in this game? How is this going? We're just going to keep doing that thing. David also wants to say Drew Allar and the running backs are crazy good. I was not impressed with Drew Allar tonight. I think part of the reason that they ran the ball so much is because they wanted to take the ball out of his hands. Drew looked uncomfortable in the first half. I thought his decision-making was shaky, and he reverted to a little bit of the leaky Drew who fires the ball without the rhythm and confidence that he had been playing. I did not see the same confident Drew Allar. A couple of those throws over the middle, again, those are NFL throws. They're going to keep me coming back every single time. I'm going to get hurt every single time, but this was not a clean game from Drew. Now, from that perspective, part of that was Penn State, as you saw, came out in the first half of this game in stacked formations, in bunches, expecting aggressive man coverage, press man coverage, guys getting up in the grill of their receivers, and Illinois just ran zone. They ran a lot of zone in the first half. Now, again, I don't know if any of those plays were open. And to give, this is always you've got to watch the film, and we're going to be doing that at bluewhiteillustrated.com to give a full breakdown and to give everyone their due. I always come on here and I say something I regret later of, oh, that wasn't totally accurate once I go back and watch the film. But you can watch the film with me, basically. Like, you can't sit in this room with me, which is I will be glued to this chair basically from now until we finish the film study tomorrow. But if you want to join us, bluewhiteillustrated.com, we have a flash sale going on right now for this big game. Penn State comes out on top. Join the victory parade, even if you aren't necessarily the happiest person about how it happened. 50% off, promo code WE ARE, and use that at checkout. You get 50% off the annual membership. You and I can talk about these things in the message board thread. We can break down the real nitty-gritty changes from Penn State and the Illinois defense. But to me, the story of the game from the positive side is Penn State won, and they controlled the line of scrimmage even after losing 2 guards. But part of that is because the deep passing game wasn't there, and I also think the rhythm of the passing game was off tonight. So we'll have to see what happened and why. But part of it was Drew was just not in sync. Not trying to start off in a win here as a negative, because that's a difficult team that they were able to beat, but there were opportunities, it felt like at times, for them to score points deep in the red zone where you're not settling for field goals, because Drew Allar was errant on a couple of throws, one to Khalil Dinkins down the seam and one on that third down conversion they should have had. The fourth down, I don't put that on him. That was a good pressure by Illinois. And he had to throw that kind of around that guy. Larry says the score won't indicate it, but Penn State dominated. They didn't survive. They could have won by more. So this was not the game we were expecting from the point total, from the process and how they have been playing. So yes, the defense dominated in the second half. The offensive line churned out a lot of yards, and there were a lot of empty possessions that should have resulted in points. But I don't want to give just kind of this, let's skate past those things, because there were issues in this game for Penn State. And I think part of that is the offensive sync from how they were playing, in the passing game, which has brought a lot of balance. One of the issues why they had to kind of grind out these drives of 8, 13, 12, 9, 6, 8 plays is because they couldn't get any chunks. They could not generate those chunk plays. And that's really, to me, that's the mystery I want to find out in this game, because pass protection was good. This to me was a find it out game for Penn State on a couple of players, excuse me. Drew Shelton and Nick Dawkins passed the test already, just from the eyeball test. I didn't see any bad pressures. I didn't see anything where they were leaky, and there were some domination blocks. I tried to highlight as many as I could. I couldn't keep up because Penn State's offensive line was eviscerating the defensive line for Illinois. So on that note, Larry and people that are happy with the win, totally agree. That is one of the best things you can take from this game, is that the run game was enough to sustain them. Steven says we won, which is more than Ole Miss can say tonight. Run game is going to need to continue to protect Allar, but at least Penn State has that this year. Yep, I would agree. With that particular assessment. Let's run through some of your other comments here. A. Campbell, he's back. He says, I like Coach Kotelnicki overall, but third and medium calls were rough. Thoughts? It works when you run the quarterback on 3rd and 6, meaning Tyler Warren on those read options. I don't necessarily know about the second one because I was doing a bunch of other stuff trying to get ready for the show. That's the problem with these non-blowouts, is I'm trying to prepare for every contingency. So some of these plays I don't get the in-depth review that I would like to come and talk to you about these in the second half. But some of the third and medium calls, they were 5 of 8 at one point. I didn't necessarily have a problem with their third down calls outside of the execution. And again, if you only have one option, and it seemed like they were taking the ball out of Drew's hands in the second half in some of these situations, I don't have a hard opinion about it, especially considering they were going to go for it on fourth down. And that is a couple of the situations they set up. If you get a good play on 3rd and 5, and then you set up a fourth down, they tried it a couple of times and it didn't really work out. There were some things that I thought they would get to more often in this game that they didn't. But again, they were expecting to get so much more press man coverage from what I saw early in the week and what they were doing in the first half of this game. So I think part of this is give credit to Illinois on that particular side of things for playing zone coverage very well. They were very disciplined in their zones. They didn't give up a lot of easy completions, and they forced Drew Allar to make some decisions with his eyes that I think we saw regretted immediately. A lot of balls falling at the feet of players when he's trying to scramble, one to Liam Clifford, one to Tyler Warren, that usually he makes. And I'm not trying to harp on that, but when you come to these 3rd and medium calls and we have the conversation about that particular area, I do think there are some aspects of that which kind of lead into the things that didn't go well tonight for Penn State. And they win 21-7 in this game. The defense was absolutely dominant. We'll get it back to your comments and your thoughts here on the show, but we do have to get to our defensive player of the game, which, if I can find it, we'll get to here in just 1 second. Oh, everyone loves it when you're waiting for the imaging, don't you? There it is. The play of the game, defensive player of the game, is Zane Durant. I'm just going to say it right now. The defensive play of the game, the player of the game, is brought to you by State College criminal defense attorney Matt McClenahan of McClenahan Law Firm. He was giving me his takes earlier today. He was at the game, by the way. So at least the Wi-Fi was working at the game because he was texting me during the game. He's an alum, super fan. That's why he's here on the show. He wants to support Blue White Illustrated. He wants to support Penn State football. If you ever need a defense attorney, hopefully you do not, but Matt's a great guy and a Penn State fan. MattMlaw.com. Zane Durant was awesome in this game. This was something that I think a lot of us were pointing to in terms of a guy that had a chance to have a breakout performance, and he missed a couple of those tackles in the backfield, but a sack, 4 solo tackles, 2 TFLs, should have been 2 more of each of those. I thought that was a really good game from him. Abdul Carter, obviously, at the end of the game, I want to say pads a little bit of the stats here. 3 TFLs, sack and a half, 7 total tackles. You can make a strong case for Abdul Carter as well. Interesting that they list him as a linebacker here on the Penn State defensive chart here in the stat broadcast. He did play a good bit off the ball tonight in the second half. So that conversation can keep going. We can keep debating that idea. But I wanted to highlight Zane Durant because the way the defensive tackles is where I was going to start this is the defensive line, the defensive tackles specifically were dominant in this game. They couldn't run the ball. Illinois could not run the ball. They averaged 1.1 yard per carry with all of the negative plays. Now, Fagan did end the game 4.9 yards per carry and 64 total yards. But I think 34 of those came on one play. So I hate to do that. You take out the one big run, which happened because Tony Rojas has to tackle better. And they have no offense at that point. Luke Altmaier in this game, in the first half. Something else I thought was interesting from the Penn State defense, it felt like they were willing to give Illinois the RPOs at one point. They were selling out to stop the run. So we're going to stop the run. And if you get a couple of those RPO plays, as long as they don't turn into busted play long, the free safety has to make a tackle if the corner doesn't. It felt like at a point they were fine giving them those slants over the middle. And obviously, the negative plays in the second half were a huge part of that because they were stopping the run, and Illinois wants to run the football. They're not particularly good at running the football, but through volume and, extending some drives, what they did in the first half, they're able to put together some drives. So generally, the passing attack from Illinois is what we expected. Luke Altmaier, this is what I was saying earlier this week. If you give him a picture that he understands, he'll throw the football up to those receivers on the outside. They got a good back shoulder game. He can pick a good one-on-one. He can diagnose if you give him man coverage. But if you don't, he'll throw the ball right to A.J. Harris for a pick 6, which Should have been a pick six. Everyone agrees. Like Zion Tracy knows what he did on that play, but that was hard to watch. It was hard to watch it in real time. You have this, like, if you're watching from home, maybe you're watching from home like me because you're here and you're not coming out of the stadium right now. If you're out of the stadium, coming out of the stadium on your Wi-Fi watching this, bless your heart, I love you. But you do not respect data limits, or you have unlimited data, and I don't understand that lifestyle. But you watch that game, you watch a play, and you see the foul happen, you see the penalty happen, and then you watch the rest of the plays. Like, kind of feel bad for the people who don't realize yet. That's how I was feeling. It always stinks. You want to celebrate as a Penn State fan. You want to see a pick six. You want to see defensive scoring. You want to see the exciting plays happen. And then everyone goes, well, I guess that's not actually what happened. Let's go to this question here. When does Herb Brooks' style of, again, on running and punishment come into play with these penalties? 2 years of missed field goals from Sander Sahaydak. Drew and his throws got to be better. I agree. I agree with all of that. Like, that's kind of the setup for what we kind of said here in the first 20 minutes of the show. They just decided in the second half, why go away from what was working when I have to see what the final run totals here in the second half were, because they've got to be crazy. And never really lost effectiveness. That's the part I kept thinking is they're going to take a shot here. They've got to take a shot here. They've got to take it. Nope. They took one shot. And on that play, there's a little bit of pressure. It's a rolling pocket. It's a little muddy. I don't know why Drew's fading away. He could have stepped into that throw. He could have launched that with a little bit. I mean, Amari Evans got behind the guy. We talked about that this week. It's a bit of a coaching point to underthrow it if you're going to miss short, so that what we saw tonight happens, and it forces the defensive back, or it forces the ref really to make a play there. And the other part of that is if you throw it in stride and he catches it, it's a touchdown, and then you don't have to worry about the kicker. So there is some concern, I think, if that continues later on in the year. They need to find an avenue to the explosiveness. But I'm curious. I just want to go back and watch this of what Illinois was doing that prevented Penn State from throwing the football. Like, and because it came out, they were coming out and they were being more aggressive. They were trying to take those shots that they have been all year in the first half, and they really just deferred that to just one or two times in the second half. So let's see. Second half running totals. 28 rushing attempts, 7 passing attempts for 46 yards on 6 completions. So Penn State was very fine. They were happy to run 28 times and average 4.5, almost 5 yards a carry. Some of the drives coming up empty, I think, is a frustration for the offense. We're getting into this now where it's feeling a little nitpicky in a win, but there are some things I think you can point to in this particular game from that perspective, that the passing, the pass defense early in the game, I think if that continues, there's going to be some issues there. I don't believe this is sustainable, that they can take the second half and shut down every offense that they're going to see over the next 2 months. So making sure they start faster on both sides. They only gave up 7 points in the first half, despite, I think, once again coming out and not having sharpness. And this is where that particular part of the game is. You're playing Zion Tracy, and you're playing Zakee Wheatley out of position, and Jalen Reed and guys are filling from different positions than they're normally used to. And so the function of those responsibilities is slightly different. And you got guys that aren't playing with natural instincts right away. And then some guys are just, they're young, they're out there and they're making some mistakes, and they're playing against very good football players. And they gave up a couple of plays, but generally 64% completion percentage from the opposing quarterback for under 200 yards and an interception. It was a good day for the defense. Michael Fox says that kicking game, though. Here's the problem. And I have a friend of mine who texted me before the show started. He said, I know you hate to do it, but you're going to be talking about special teams all week. And I just don't know what to say, because kicking is like golf, and I don't golf. It's all mental. And if you got the leg and all you do is kick and you practice this and practice this and practice this, and I mean, his leg looked fine. It looked like, I don't know, the hip, maybe he's got some sort of like adhesions in his quad that made it his hip flexor not go. I don't know. Like, I don't understand kicking. So it's a problem for sure for Penn State football. Getting through a lot of your questions, and thank you to everybody here in the live chat. We just got so many of these questions here. We're going to get to some of your questions. You don't have to donate to the channel. I always appreciate people because it does come up in a very bright, specially lit box for me to see what you want to know. Showtime is back. I always appreciate Showtime being here. He says, OC did not stick with the run early. QB average today, as you said. Kicker is a mess for Division I. Number 6 safety was poor. That Zakee Wheatley is who he's talking about there. Good to see you. Have a great job. Thank you so much, Showtime. Zakee Wheatley, I think from that boundary position has been struggling. And some of the things that he struggled with last year, pursuit angles, tackles. He had a couple timely tackles in the second half. He has struggled in games and then come back and played better at other positions. But yes, there are times where he needs to be better as a run defender and generally tackling in the open field. That is not necessarily what he showed so far as a strength in his game. The one play, and I was, again, BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, we got the in-game thread, which is if you are feeling feelings and you don't want to deal with the opposing team trying to dunk on you on social media, people in the chat at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com will do it for you. Like, you should join. It's just to see it, you got to come into an in-game thread. But I do some breaking down of analysis and some stills and what I can do quick and dirty when I'm in between trying to do analysis. And on one of those plays, the 30-yard completion on 3rd and forever, this is, again, what I'm talking about. If you got Cam Miller and Zion Tracy on the field, and they targeted those players specifically on screens because Tracy, I think, is like 170 pounds. Neither of these guys are very big, physical players. So they got washed out of that particular play, which leaves one-on-one, by the way, with bodies on the field for Zakee Wheatley to try and tackle the running back. His attempt wasn't good, but that was a hard position to be in. So pursuit angles and just that, nobody's going to be KJ Winston in the open field. That's the problem is some of the guys you're comparing him to are very good. And his skill set is ball hawk, free safety, playing in coverage. He's big enough to play, and he's got to get better at that because I don't think KJ Winston's coming back anytime soon. But that's how you unlock Jalen Reed playing that Lion position and fixing some of these issues so that you're now a little more aggressive on that side. Another thing that I thought was interesting in this game is there was not as much 12 personnel from Illinois as I thought there would be. Part of that is because they couldn't run the football. When Zane Duran is in the backfield the whole game and Keziah Izzard is in the backfield the whole game, it doesn't matter if you got 2 extra tight ends on the field and you're forcing Dakari Nelson to play over one of those slot corners because you're not running the football effectively. But throwing out of those formations and doing more out of 12 personnel is something I was thinking in the back of my head we might see because of Penn State's injuries. Something very interesting I want to see, and bouncing around some of these thoughts here. 2 guards come out of that game and don't go back in. That's a concern. Sal Wormley, watch what happened early in the game, got poked in the eye from what I can tell. I mean, he was holding his face after a hand went near his face. He didn't come back in the game. That's scary. First off, don't know what's going on. Just telling you what I saw watching the replay. And then JB Nelson comes out and doesn't come back in, a guy that has a history of injuries and being out for extended period of time. Cooper Cousins went in and played, and they were still able to dominate. But Wenger Ioane is only one guy. And so you already have issues of health across the board, especially on defense. Some of these things need to, they need to fix that. Or hopefully they need to come out of this game with those not being serious injuries or long-term injuries. Brett says, could be wrong, but I think Illinois ran too high safety almost exclusively, and Penn State took what they gave. Yeah, there was a lot of soft coverage. I know it was zone, but I'm just curious how they were able to mix it up because Drew Allar is a very smart quarterback, and he's able to diagnose zone pretty well. And whatever they were doing from a rotation perspective or how they were surprising Penn State with those zones is what I'm talking about here. Of I've seen Drew Allar read the defense and go, okay, I know where to go with the football based on what I'm seeing. And I didn't see that. And so either the offense was being thwarted, like the schemes were not opening up receivers for the quarterback, or they were there and Drew wasn't taking those passes. There's not going to be a lot of them because he didn't throw the ball a whole lot, especially in the second half. But that first half, that's the part I'm curious about. But yeah, Brett, to your point, if they are playing too high safety, and you want to run the ball, go ahead and run the football. And that's what Penn State did. But they didn't, even then they didn't. They dropped an extra safety in the box. Once they sniffed what Penn State was doing in the third quarter, it became a lot of one high. And Penn State didn't attack at that point. So I'm very curious about that particular part of how all of that played out, because a lot of that happens for us, unfortunately, sitting here off screen. And that's why we got to do this from multiple angles, multiple times. You got to watch every play a lot to understand each of the individual parts. Another thing I want to talk about. So let's talk about some fun things from Andy Kotelnicki that I'm assuming. So I'm going to talk a little bit above my head here from a football theory perspective. They ran a lot of unbalanced lines where you have the right tackle lining up outside the left tackle on the other side of the line of scrimmage, or something like that, where you had a guard and then two tackles on the other side, a lot of unbalanced, not just six offensive linemen, but moving the offensive line. Running against an odd front, Landon Tangwall on the Tailgate Show talked about this. It can be difficult because it changes some of the angles and it changes the one-on-ones where you don't have, especially in zone running concepts, a good double team to pass off and pick up and get to the second level. Some of the ways that you can run those three-man fronts, you have three guys inside the offensive linemen from the tackles in. So they're five techniques, but they're shaded inside the tackles. But if you move one of those tackles over and suddenly you reset the center of the line, you are making it an even front by where the gaps are, where the offensive linemen are. My guess is that's what that does. And I just think that is very creative. I was watching and I'm like, why are they doing that? And then I'm looking at the way they're running those plays, and it seemed to be very effective, and they were able to get the same rhythm of their blocks and get to the second level, and they were able to dominate in a lot of these situations up front from a schematic perspective in the run game and from a physical perspective. But those are tied together because if you give your offensive linemen good double teams to get into so that they are winning from angles and leverage, then their natural strength can take over. And Penn State's bigger up front than Illinois. Penn State is bigger and stronger and more athletic on both sides of the line of scrimmage from this particular team. And they did a lot of that. I thought that was super interesting. And then something that I forgot about and I should have remembered, last year, one of the things that they did is they had very wide splits. So, the offensive linemen, their feet, in between their feet is what is the gap in between them. But how wide or tight, or white, apparently, how wide or tight they are is called a split. And so there were times that they would have these extremely wide splits between the guard and the tackle. And I had no idea what was going on last year, and I watched it again. They started reading B-gap defenders. Normally, when you're the quarterback and you're in a read option play, you are reading the end of the line of scrimmage, the defensive end, linebacker, whoever it is that you're leaving unblocked intentionally, and then choosing to give the football or take it yourself based on that player's actions. Last year, what they did against Johnny Newton, who was the team's best player in a first-round draft pick, is they started reading him. So instead of trying to block him, they just decided whatever he does, we'll do the opposite of that. And they did some of that in this game, and they were able to get Katron Allen up the middle, Nick Singleton up the middle. So it's just sprinkling in these ideas and concepts they've used over and over again, and using unorthodox techniques to generate 239 yards of rushing offense in the game. So again, even if it wasn't the complete domination of pass and run by land and by sea, they were still able to generate a lot of good explosive plays. And this is where I want to get into this now, because I always forget, because everyone has a different idea of what an explosive run is and what an explosive passing play is. So Penn State technically got 4 big-time throws in this game of 15-plus yards, but they got 110 yards rushing on 9 separate rushes of 10 or more yards. So again, the explosive percentages, I think they'll fall short overall for the number of plays they ran, but 110 yards rushing, having 9 carries that go for 10 or more yards is absolutely a great place to be if you're the Penn State offense. The only thing they couldn't do, because Illinois is a good defense, is they could not break the big one. I think that counter run that Drew Allar had at the goal line, that they said on the broadcast, like, if that's Nick Singleton, that's going 97 yards. That was blocked really well. And that's another thing I want to highlight here. Anthony Donko had a lot of monster blocks tonight. Drew Shelton looked very good. Tyler Warren had a lot of really good blocks. I've been more impressed than I was expecting to be impressed with Khalil Dinkins as a blocker. James Franklin had talked about that in the last couple of weeks, as Dinkins had come back from his injury in training camp, and he has been an effective blocker. So in the preseason, we talked about him and Luke Reynolds, of whichever one of those guys can do the other thing better. Andrew Rappleyea. I've already edited my brain to put Luke Reynolds into the conversation. Andrew Rappleyea, a good blocker, physical player. Could he get his mental game in the passing game up to the level he needed to be a complete tight end? Because you need to be a complete tight end in this offense. And on the flip side, could Khalil Dinkins be the guy that can block and catch? Because he's a very athletic receiver for a tight end. We haven't seen a whole lot of him in the receiver in this game so far since coming back. He's been a pretty good blocker so far. Justin Warren says 21-7, a win against a well-coached, good team. Offense seemed to be too conservative. Running game looks great. Took Allar off the field too much for Pabula. Warren package one too many times. I would say literally one too many times. There was the Bo Pabula running the option that I would agree with you there. It took some of the rhythm out of that particular drive. And then Tyler Warren came back and got a run for a first down anyway. So it didn't actually end up killing that particular drive. But the Bo package does not seem to have a lot of rhythm to it, for sure. It does seem to come in and kind of glitch the offense a little bit. But, in a game where you need that rushing element from the quarterback, and you're trying to manufacture it because Drew Allar isn't the athlete that this offense in its complete evolution would like to have, trying to find that element in the offense, I understand the pursuit of it. I understand wanting to find that. I kind of think that it's better with Tyler Warren, though, because even if he doesn't give you the passing option, he's just so freaking good. He's so physical and runs through contact. And Bo Pabula is a good runner. But when it comes to running between the tackles, which is what this particular scheme is trying to do here, I'd rather have the 260-pound tight end. And I don't think that I'm being controversial or revolutionary with that idea. Jamie says Tom Allen has been phenomenal making halftime adjustments this season. Would be nice to be more aggressive in the first half defensively, but it's nice to see. So one of the things that I thought was interesting is you can see the remnants of Manny Diaz's defense and some of the concepts that he liked stay in the defense. So that sack from Cam Miller, where they have that overload pressure, it's only 5 players, but the way they lined up, that was that 7 up front from Penn State and what Manny Diaz did, in 22 and then in 23, where you play zone behind it, and then you can drop as many guys as you want. You can rush as many guys as you want. Tom Allen is more of a traditional blitz from depth guy. And I think that's not been going well, truthfully. I think that part of the defense, the timing of the blitzes, disguising them and then attacking and making the quarterback hold on to the football to make those pay off, those are kind of like a deep shot for the offense, where it takes a long time for a receiver to run down the field. And so you need explosively fast players to be doing those things so that you can execute that play correctly. And I don't know that they've really worked out who the blitzers need to be that can disguise it and time it correctly, because I've seen it coached and done well on film from him before. Penn State last season when in Indiana came to Penn State, I thought there were a couple of those pressures from the field that really got Penn State. They haven't been working so great right now, but once they rolled out that pressure package, things started to really roll for the Penn State defense. So aggressiveness in the first half, I don't know if it's necessarily aggressiveness because I saw enough blitzing. I just think it was they played pretty conventional press man coverage. We want to play that way. And then they started mixing things up a little bit more, which I expected in this game. I didn't think they were going to be able to get away with playing just man coverage against a team that showed you not just throughout this season, but in the game in the first quarter that you can't do that with this team. They're too good at diagnosing and attacking all of those things. You guys are awesome. There are 500 people here watching this show. I'm always so happy because I feel like some of you might be here for the first time. If you are, hi, my name is T. Frank. I do film analysis for Penn State football, for Blue White Illustrated on Penn State football. If you're new here, please subscribe to the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel because we have a Monday through Thursday lineup that I think you will really like. James Franklin's press conference comes up Monday. We are like hours away from that, already turning over the clock to UCLA. We'll have that broadcast in its entirety shortly after it in a live replay. Tuesday is our BWI live show where we're going to talk about all the things that I got wrong tonight and all the things that we all didn't see the first time around on Tuesday, plus your thoughts and more about what happens and previewing the next game. Wednesday and Thursday are our other live shows. So we got a lot of great stuff for you here on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel, but I would be stupid if I didn't tell you about our deal to join BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Just want to remind you of this again. Promo code WEARE for 50% off of the annual membership. So you get a year's worth of BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. You make a decision now that future you is going to really appreciate because you'll get 365 days of coverage, taking you almost into October of 2025. We can have all of those conversations about that. Getting into the chat here, see what you guys are talking about. I think we got through all of the thoughts that we had lined up. Kyle says, I watched the game for fun. I watched T. Frank to understand why I had fun or I was sad. I'm glad that Kyle understands what I'm trying to do for you. The other thing is, like, if they lose, I want to give you the specific language for your anger or your sadness. So if you're new here, Kyle summed it up pretty well there. Joel says, passing game needs to develop because they will need a balanced attack to beat USC and Ohio State, if not more. Yeah, I would say that's the thing coming out of tonight, that I was expecting a different Drew Allar. My analysis this week, what I said on the tailgate show, I was wrong. And everyone's allowed to have an off game. Drew Allar has not had an off game in 2024. The thing I would say that is a bit of a concern is that it was a big game. It was a night game. And those are two of the games that he's struggled in, those environmental pressures, because I felt like a lot of the problems here today were unforced in the first half. They had the opportunity for rhythm and points early, and those ended in field goal attempts. And generally, my philosophy is I'm against field goals in general. Sander Sahaydak would be on the bench, and you wouldn't be mad at him if they score touchdowns in those situations. What else we got here in the chat? You got any other thoughts? Let me look at my notes and see if there's anything we missed here from the game that I thought was interesting. No, that's what I had. You got anything else other than Duke, who is here again, was saying James Franklin is the problem? This is his regular opinion. So, we all have our consistent things that I talk about, scoring points and not wanting to kick field goals, and AG Duke being here, being the representative. James Franklin is the problem. I don't have anything to add there. I don't think that is the period at the end of a sentence and the end of a conversation, because on the other side of that is just yelling, I think. And I don't do that. I have an opinion on that. So if there's anything else. USC is going to be the toughest game yet. I'm interested because it was 21-10. Wisconsin was up on USC at one point, and then they rolled in the second half. I did not see the second half. So I think, here's the thing. One thing I do know about the USC offense specifically is they've got a very talented left tackle who is a true freshman and has, I think, shown so far you can beat him. And Penn State and their generally that offensive line, they've tried to improve it at USC. They've tried to go in the transfer portal. They've gotten some recruits. They've gotten some talent. It takes time to develop an offensive line. And if you didn't have one and you can't build one quickly through, NIL or the transfer portal, it doesn't matter how good your quarterback is. If he's under pressure when you drop back, it's a problem. And I think that is maybe something that got them in this particular game early against Wisconsin, and then they figured it out in the second half. Matt says USC doesn't scare me. Track team, you can power ball them too. I would say the thing I'll be interested in for Penn State after this game and the way the defensive line dominated, I thought the defensive line would be good in this game. They dominated, destroyed the Illinois offensive line. Will they be able to do that against USC? Because the interesting thing is they're going to be a more dangerous RPO team. So this was an RPO team. Control the ball through completions and running the football. And they only got half of that in the second half. They could not run the football. They got some completions, but they didn't throw the ball enough in situations that it put Penn State in a bind. Lincoln Riley is not going to give you that. They run, I think, a pretty good scheme. It is very collegey, a lot of traditional ideas mixed up in some unorthodox ways from kind of a rough say nothing, so I don't have to go into super deep detail on it. But generally, that quarterback, Zachariah Smith, the slot receiver, and Lincoln Riley are going to provide more of a challenge in the passing game. They are not going to allow you to put them in third and long all the time. And so that particular game, I don't want this to turn into a USC pregame show necessarily. But yeah, looking at UCLA and what they've been so far, it's not a super interesting matchup yet. I was watching them a little bit. I think it was yesterday on film, and I was getting real bored. It was Friday. I had a little extra time. I was like, yeah, I'm going to do some advanced scouting, and I almost fell asleep watching their offense. So, yeah, that is going to be an interesting lineup over the next couple of weeks because this game, I said that this should be a statement game for the Penn State offense, and it turned into a statement game for the Penn State run game. And that's really trying to summarize 42 runs here. I was usually trying to get an hour, but I might be tap dancing on some thin ice here of content. And I don't want to waste your time because it is 11:30 at night. If you got any other questions or thoughts in the chat, we can keep going for a little bit longer. But Penn State wins 21-7 in this game on the back of their defense. Probably haven't talked enough about Jalen Reed and the second half he had specifically being all over the place. I want to see exactly on film, go back and see how he was able to help fix some of the issues that Penn State had in the first half of just being a little bit leaky, in terms of corralling things. There does seem to be something about the Penn State defense where third and long is their weakness. They are their most vulnerable when they have the other team exactly where they want them. But in this game, at the end of the game, they were able to put pressure on Luke Altmaier and get those tackles and sacks and end the game. I mean, the Penn State defense ended the game here. So great job by them to make those corrections at halftime. That's another interesting thing that we're going to have to look into of, who was playing where. A lot of bullets flying, not able to track all of those things from a schematic perspective. But Zion Tracy played a lot. Cam Miller played a lot. And so those guys, their evaluation of how they played going forward is going to be very interesting because we talked about Dejon Lane. He didn't make an impact on this game. And so I think that's a good thing. You leaned on some of the guys you trust. And again, this was a team that likes to play spread. so you can get your slot corners on the field, who I think in this situation, given the balance of what they were expecting, those are the guys they would trust, are those slot corners. And overall, that bore out to be the right decision for Penn State, not to try and force it and play Jalen Reed and potentially give up some big plays because you have guys on the field who maybe aren't ready just yet. But we'll be going through, and of course, on Sundays, we go through the snap counts from PFF, and Ryan Snyder goes through all of those and gives you the idea of who played and where, and we'll break all that stuff down on the message board later in the on Sunday. And by the way, it's going to be pretty quick. So start very early in the morning and go throughout the afternoon, breaking all that stuff down. Let's see. Nope, not talking about that. We're just arguing about James Franklin in the chat here. Yeah, okay. So I think we covered all of it, and it seems like you're good too. So that'll do it for tonight on the BWI Live postgame show. Again, I'm Thomas Frank Carr. Thank you guys for being here. This is a good time. James Franklin's postgame press conference. He'll say some stuff. Hopefully it sounds a lot like what I just said. But it's going to be on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel, so I encourage you to go check that out as you're winding down from the game and you're hanging out and watching other games on, I don't know, are you going to watch Oregon tonight? I'm definitely going to go to bed, but if you're one of those sickos that wants to put something on Oregon, UCLA in the Big Ten after dark, more power to you. But we'll have instant analysis from the field and James Franklin's press conference coming up on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel. Subscribe. All that great stuff I already told you about. Like the video. Always appreciate you guys. We'll be back later with more analysis on this game and the next at Blue White Illustrated.